Over the last 10 years, the Safdie brothers have made a mark on American independent cinema that many would envy, even receiving a quarter of their success. And their meteoric rise between Uncut Gems being an indie success, many naming Adam Sandler being one of the greatest award snubs of all time, and Uncut Gems to Josh Safdie directing Marty Supreme and it being one of the biggest films going into this upcoming award season, has broken my brain in a way that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. While the Safdies have been making films for nearly 20 years, both were born and raised Jewish New Yorkers who started off as young kids practicing making their own movies because their father, Alberto, was a huge cinephile, which would lead Josh Safdie to directing his feature-length debut, The Pleasure of Being Robbed, a film about a woman who was a kleptomaniac who stole Kate Spade handbags, which would premiere at South by Southwest in 2008 before playing outside a competition at Cannes alongside Benny Safdie's short film, The Acquaintances of a Lonely John. Whether this is because of Josh's lack of critical success from his debut or the fact that both brothers equally love film, they quickly formed a directorial pairing after this, enjoying working with Ronald Braunstein as a writer, and they developed a collaborative ability to create anxiety-provoking fever dreams, with some of these characters having an abrasive quality that is nauseating. Yet there's an undeniable human core that makes us not necessarily root for these men, but have pity for Lenny as a mess of a father and Daddy Longlegs, extremely so when navigating how substance abuse takes over your life and heaven knows what, and for as despicable and irredeemable as Robert Pattinson's Connie is in Good Time, we can also understand his real care and love for his brother. And as I watched Marty Supreme twice in the past few weeks, I thought about the comparisons I saw between Marty and Howard. These are two men that are wildly unlikable, but are also charismatic, entirely selfish, but also driven by some wholesome pursuits, and commit awful actions that lead to self-manufactured consequences that are the product of their own greed and attempts to reach some form of American exceptionalism by being the wealthiest or the best or obtaining the most capital. And there's so many people around us that look like them. I think we're so focused on our reaction to these people that we don't actually take a step back and realize that there is a Marty and a Howard in so many people's different lives. There's so many people trying to pursue being the best right now, and it is a self-destructive pursuit because we're all trapped inside this system of capitalism. So many people are pursuing this facade of the American dream. They construct this entire facade around themselves, and we make us think that we're actually more great than we are because we're trying to become the best, and really it leads us to having so little. And that's why I think it's so important to look at these two characters, because again, we're so repulsed by the Martys and the Howards in the world, yet we deny the fact that so many of these qualities that we see in these two men are around us and all the men in our lives, and so many of these men need so much help. My name is James, this is Movie Good or Movie Bad, and today I want to do a character analysis of two of my favorite characters in film in the last 7 or so years. They're the embodiment of a self-destructive endless pursuit that if ending in ultimate victory or success, most of us would ignore. Most of us would view these people as champions, recognize them in victory. We'd put them down on the tapestry of history and we'd ignore that so many others never quite make it to that place. These are the Howards and the Martys of the world, and at least in their case, they get a lot closer than most people. We don't even talk about the people who are farther away from that goal. And I think an aspect of conversation that's really lost when talking about these two characters is not the fact that, they ruin the lives of everyone around them, but the fact that so many around them are actually driven and pulled into their orbit, not just kind of getting caught up in their schemes, but also reflecting different aspects of these characters and these people, and also sometimes just presenting them in much more palatable ways. If you do like this video, please like, subscribe, hit that bell, comment your thoughts on this video or the Safdies films, or what you think about Marty or Howard as characters, because really they are something. Feel free to check out my other videos after this, or also follow me on other social media platforms where I talk about movies pretty much all the time. I should name this too, at the time of recording and releasing this video, Marty Supreme is not yet available on PVOD. Because of this, I'm very limited in the clips I can use from the film, and because of that, there's going to be lots of stock footage of ping pong. If there's any copyright issues involving the clips from Uncut Gems, you're just going to see clips of diamonds and gems. I'm going to keep it visually interesting, but just so you all know in case it seems a little random at times. There are of course full spoilers as we go into this video. I don't know how I could talk about either of them without full spoilers, and as we start the video, let's talk about Howard Ratner and what exactly I think of the man from Uncut Gems. When I attempt to understand Adam Sandler's Howard, I actually think the most about the opening and closing of Uncut Gems, which respectively are of a camera pulling literally out of Howard's as he's getting a colonoscopy, and the finale of the film zooming into the bullet hole ending the man's life, which was the result of his actions regardless of his tremendous monetary win. When I think about solely the opening of the film, I think about how Howard is full of shit He is a man constantly maintaining the facade of wealth and success in order to maintain his status as a high-end jewelry store clerk, but it's all just part of this larger sham. And when I pair this opening with the finale of the film, I realize these are two of the only times that we ever really get to look deep inside of Howard and examine his person, and while that is a literalist take on interiority, it doesn't make my interpretation feel any less true to me. I mean, I think there's a reason that we hear that Howard might have colon cancer, and there's a reason that he brushes it off, and again, I think that's so key to the film, but more on that later. By maintaining this mask of greatness that Howard has, he's able to maintain his capital. By maintaining this capital, he's able to have the connections that he does with athletes like Kevin Garnett or other celebrities popping through his store. With that level of clientele, he attracts other folks who want to get as close as they can to stardom by having access to the jewelry of the stars, and that is how Howard is able to maintain the cash flow that he does to gamble at the level that he does. But considering his situation at the near start of the film and the money he owes, there's a clear reason the film ends with his death. The facade is caught up to him. By the time we get to the finale of the film, there is a chance he's still full of shit. There is a chance that this is not some kind of peak where Howard stays at. Judging from his past and everyone around him throughout the film, what's going to stop him from putting in another bet? What's going to say, you know what, double or nothing, let's go to the blackjack table? Could you imagine what Howard would have done if DraftKings was much more accessible by the time that this movie was being made or took place? There have always been people who've worn fakes of luxury brands. I doubt that Howard was able to get a Gucci shirt to smooth things over with an employee who was upset, and even if he thought it was Gucci, how does Howard actually know for sure that he was duped? Howard is a man who is so overwhelmingly blinded by the mythology that he builds not only around himself but also everyone around him, and to me, throwing this shirt at an employee is a big part of it. He thinks that if he maintains a level of goodwill, people will stay in his orbit, when really there's a distinction between those who are blinded by Howard, which I would describe as the Julias of Howard's world, and the Dinas, or Howard's wife, who've lived through every single step of this illusion and recognize that this is a continuous cycle. He is a liar, he is a cheat, he is someone who is constantly scheming, regardless of how charming Howard is by the second or how temporary his successes are. Thinking of specific moments within the film, while there are many character interactions and bits of implicating dialogue and glances that shape Howard's character, one of the simplest and most recurring to me is the BS involving the door at the jewelry store. It is constantly having issues, frequently leading the door to never being able to let anybody in or out, sometimes needing to be physically manipulated in order to be opened, and ultimately creating the scenario where not only is Howard able to lock the door and see his victory lap take place, but also forms the overwhelmingly hot environment that leads a man to taking Howard's life, and Arno's, who is Dina's brother-in-law and a loan shark who's given money to Howard, and for just a split second, he too buys the mythology being made in front of us that is Howard Ratner, before he also falls to the facade of the broken glass door, easily being able to look in and out, but having no actual way of escape when it comes to preventing his own death in Arno's final few moments. Speaking of mythologizing himself and crafting these stories, I even think about how Howard uses it not only for himself, but also to pull people into his orbit in aggressive ways. When he first meets Kevin Garnett, Howard talks about the supposed African Jews who are trapped and are defined by their lack of cars or luxury goods, which is the determined indicator for success in Howard's mind, and Garnett's immediate proximity to Howard leads to failure to poke holes in even the most insignificant parts of the story, including this framing that implies that these African Jews are African Jews, or even the fact that they want to be doing this physically intensive work rather than being exploited in these mineral mines for the Western world for no or low wages. But again, I don't know how much of this story Howard actually believes in, but it seems like he lies to himself just pretty often, is unaware of it, and I think he's unable to see through his own lies anymore. I think a really great example of how Howard gets caught up in his own lies is I think about the steps that Howard takes in order to get this gem to auctioneers, only to learn it's been appraised for far less than he believed, and showing even though he has the skills to assess the quality of the stone, he is so swept up in this campfire story because it gives him the hope he needs that he doesn't even take the steps that he could have figured out, actually, was I scammed or not, or should I buy this gem or not? He's so caught up in this grand myth, and I don't quite know if he can see through that. I'd also probably argue that he needs this hope not only when attempting to make his big score, but also when you go back again to the beginning of the film. While most people are caught up in the shock value that is the colonoscopy at the beginning of the film, I feel like it's more important to go much later in the film and think about one of the most quiet scenes of the film, where we learn that the colonoscopy actually leads to a concerning result. We do also learn at this point that Howard's father did have colon cancer. There is likely a real fear driving Howard's mind, whether how cognizant he is of his limited time that becomes even more limited by the conclusion of the film, and I wouldn't be surprised that fear is making him act even more reckless than typical. Howard is likely a man who is very scared. He is scared for what will happen with these loan sharks. He's scared what will happen with his wife Dina. He is scared what will happen with this gem and what will happen with his colon cancer, and if he can finally make it to some kind of victory by the end of this to prove that he is something greater to everyone around him, because I think honestly Howard is a very, very insecure man, and that is driving this attempt to become the best in his world. And again, this is just my interpretation. There is no absolute truth in this, but I think about some of the interactions that Howard has at different points in the film, whether it be with his wife or his associates that know about his gambling, where there is real concern, there is real worry. They do understand that something worse could be happening, but Howard is just maintaining this lie that, has become second nature for him, and he's doing it without any sense of self-awareness. And again, he likely has no sense of self-awareness for any aspect of his life, but still, there is a very intricate lie here, and so many people see through it, and so many people know why Howard is doing this, but I don't know if he knows why. Now, the general population's response to Uncut Gems was corrosive. I had associates of mine from college who said it was among one of the worst films they'd ever seen. I knew parents of friends who said that Howard was one of the most repulsive human beings they'd ever come across on the silver screen. Making a cursory search of I Hate Uncut Gems on Google leads to more than a few results that remind me of a handful of conversations at the time, and nearly all of it is based around whether or not a good movie needs a protagonist who is a good person, which is clearly a flawed basis to engage with a film, but is Howard a good person? He does lots of horrible and questionable things. He's a man who is so fixated on his potential bets that he's clearly driven a wedge in how he spends time with his children. With his youngest, he is distracted when supposedly putting him to bed. With his middle child, while they're able to have an initial conversation with basketball, it clearly becomes about gambling rather than the sport that his son is taking an interest in. And I can tell that his son really understands, oh, dad bet a lot of money on this. That is bad. And there's also his daughter who barely wants to have a conversation with him, probably seeing more clearly than anyone else besides Dina who he is as a man. Dina's disgust for Howard is by far the most understandable. She's known him for the longest and is aware of the fullest extent of his person, whether he was beginning his affair with Julia before or after their marriage dissolved, alongside having his apartment away from his kids. These qualities make Howard a horrid father and husband, and I named quite a few terrible actions he did throughout the film, but coming back to the film now, rewatching it after a couple of years, I only view him as this overwhelmingly sad person overcompensating for some type of feeling around lacking. The reason I brought in the general public to this conversation is that although it's only been 7 years since the film has been released, we've also seen a significant rise in sports gambling in years. In a study from 2019 called A Review of Sports Wagering Prevalence, Characteristics of Sports Bettors in Association with Problem Gambling by Ken C. Winters and Jeffrey L. Derevensky, it was shared that only 1% of gamblers believe they had a serious gambling issue at one point in their life. 45% of individuals placed a bet on sports at least once in their life. DraftKings existed in 2012 and began rapidly expanding in 2018 with increased legalization of mobile gambling, and that leads to a statistic of 22% of mobile gamblers reporting problem gambling versus 18% for in-person and 16% for PC betting. In total, 94% of individuals who said they had problematic gambling habits were fantasy sports bettors. Now in 2025, sports betting in just Maryland, there was $80.6 million in revenue just for December, which is ludicrous. What about the entire year? What about when you add up every state in total for 2025? In New York, that number was $26.3 billion just in 2025, a horrendous record to have achieved. $500 billion have been pumped into this industry since the Supreme Court expanded mobile gambling in 2018. And all throughout 2025, there have been a number of scandals involving the NBA, MLB, and college sports, and looking at data from the National Council on Problem Gambling, there was a 148% increase in calls looking for help in states where sports betting was expanded between 2017 and 2025, in comparison of that rate jumping 45% in states where sports betting was not expanded during that time. Bringing this back to Uncut Gems, I'm not excusing Howard or the Howards of the world. It is frustrating when someone in your life is not there as a father or husband or is using your money to seek momentary joy from the high of placing these high stakes bets, but there's a deep emptiness that at the same time is trying to be filled. There's a reason in split moments throughout the film where we can see others give real and genuine care to Howard, because he is a man struggling with addiction in the same way that anyone else struggling with substance abuse is, which is a mental health condition. He is very sick, whether chasing an escape from his potential cancer diagnosis or wanting a better life than the one he's gained for himself, because under capitalism you are expected to grow and grow and grow and make more money and get the bigger house and get the bigger car, and you can fall victim to that mindset regardless of your income. I'm not saying you need to forgive your deadbeat father who gambled away your college savings, or your mom who wasn't able to put food on the table because she bought so many scratchers at the gas station the attendant knows her first name and has a worried look in her eye, but there is a deep societal illness driving people towards gambling as a whole, and I'm not shaming anyone for gambling. I'm just naming there are a whole lot of people who need help and are closer to the Howards of the world who have done awful and unforgivable actions, and I'm also sad for them at the same time too. Maybe now we can recognize that there's so many Howards around us moving through the world, chasing the high of betting a little money on the Ravens game this upcoming Sunday if they made the playoffs, or whatever their sport of choice is. But as frustrating as some of these people are, they also need help, and maybe we should try and be as balanced in that approach as we can. They're not bad people, they're just people who need help who've done something really bad, and I also can't take away from how they affected you personally. It's jarring making this video and thinking about these similarities and differences between Howard and Marty. I can recognize that Howard has some level of success, and I can recognize that, this might not be substantive, or I can question how artificial or authentic it is, but the same can be said for Marty. Sure, Marty is a much younger person, he has a lot more to chase, he's a much higher ceiling to climb, but it feels like, at least in his world, that success doesn't feel as true or valid or authentic, yet he is someone who's beaten the previous world champion and only losing to Endo in the finals, but his drive makes him explosive towards everyone around him. It's also been fascinating seeing people attempt to project or place 2020's sociological framework around race on the film, because sure, it is fair to have a reaction to Timothée Chalamet's loud and boisterous award season campaign, whether you think he's earned it after giving an Al Pacino or Robert De Niro the 70s level performance, or you dislike the film and recognize he is a white man that is allowed to exist and campaign in a way that actor of colors cannot during the award season. But to apply the same framework to the character of Marty Mauser ignores a huge piece of context. Marty is a deeply charming guy that is also wildly self-centered. He is in a financial black hole for everyone around him as they've caught up in his schemes, whether you are Tyler the Creator's Wally, who is aware of Marty's pattern of asking for some money with the promise of multiplying it, or Gwyneth Paltrow's Kay, who is just beginning to understand what drives the man himself, which is this promise of wealth, fame, success, of really just being the best. And a key aspect of Marty's person beyond all this is being a 23-year-old in the wake of the Holocaust, seeing an atrocity that killed millions of people that looked like him and had the same belief system that he had, and it's why he says that he wants to be Hitler's worst nightmare. There's a sense of genuineness coming off of all of it, and we can't ignore that he is a Jewish man after World War II. I do think Marty genuinely cares for Kay, Rachel, Wally, and his family, but I think one of the most surprising moments of care comes from his conversations with Bella, a Holocaust survivor, fellow competitor, and truly a friend of Marty's. He is such a sharp contrast to Marty. Bella is a man who during the Holocaust covered his entire being in honey, making himself the living embodiment of textural nightmare with wet and sticky honey binding him to his likely only pair of clothes, risking capture from the Nazis in order to save the lives of everyone around him in an act of selflessness that could have erased the goodwill he had from being a fantastic athlete. And now he is a man who recognizes the victories that he's had, the ladders he's climbed, and he sees the beauty in being an entertainer, making others happy while others are seeing the Harlem Globetrotters. In Bella's mind, I think he has it all. He sees a beauty in being able to survive the horrors of the Holocaust, and while it's understandable how this shaped Marty's mind as a young man, Marty also navigates a world thinking about only his being and not how he's created any issues for those around him. Even in the very opening of the film, before we get our steamy intro, Marty hurts a woman's foot in order to sell an expensive shoe because really, he doesn't care much about others other than the results. When you see him framing his entire story, it's easy to see Marty as a big loser, even though we see him reaching the finals of the British Open. There is no grand feeling of victory or any sense of momentum as Marty effortlessly makes his advance up the ranks and then is squashed by Endo. His inability to accept what he has creates this grand escalation. He needed $700 from his uncle, so he stole it, so he's almost arrested, and he runs away, even though everything was going to blow over with his uncle. He tries to sneak into the Ritz because he did did not like the provided lodging from the Table Tennis Association, but because he says he's part of them, he actually racks up a bill that causes him to be removed from the Table Tennis Association on top of the mess and scene that he makes with Endo. His off-putting personality with the president of this association certainly doesn't make anything easier for him as well. He could have worn a rubber with Rachel and avoided this fear of becoming a father. If he was just a bit more honest with the dog that he has in the film, he may have gotten the money to pay his fine that way and gotten to Japan and gotten a chance to play actually in this grand tournament. If he had some humility, he wouldn't be in the situation at the end of the film where he has beaten Endo, but likely has no path to the Table Tennis Association or any financial victory from playing ping pong again. He's received a big, flashy exhibition win that truthfully could have been granted to him by Endo no longer trying, because you know what? This match meant nothing to him or little to him. And also Endo seems like such a strong mirror to Marty, especially right now, right here, in the same way that Bella was. And whether it's this victory or lying about being part of the Table Tennis Association, Marty is continuously maintaining this long series of lies in order to create this facade that he is far greater and far more important than he is, while missing nearly everything that he has right now. Going back to the opening with the shoes, we are immediately confronted with a lie too when Marty and Rachel pretend to not know each other, but they're also childhood friends, and Marty is working in his uncle's shop. In the recently released A24 podcast with Josh Safdie and Sean Baker, Baker spoke about how on his second and third time watching Marty Supreme, it was immediately clear how much of a lie was taking place, which caused Safdie to respond that when shooting it, the scene only worked once Odessa Zion, who plays Rachel, understood the scene wasn't about pulling off the con, it was about finding shoes, which prompted a friend of Safdie's on set to say that it felt like watching two people fall in love. It's also just this tiny reflection of what is unraveling throughout the entire film, but the pursuit is a lot more wholesome than with ping pong, minus maybe his inability to conceive that he is the father of being this baby and believing that Rachel has trapped him. But maybe the biggest facade of them all is while he is clearly a talented ping pong player, whether he has an orange ball or a white ball or he's wearing whatever colored shirt he has, I think about Anthony Fantano's review of the film and how he felt the film needed to show us more about Marty's talent or his interest in playing ping pong. And guys, I genuinely believe that while Marty is talented, he doesn't care about the sport. He knows he's talented, he's driven to be the best, he sees it as a way out. We see that from the victories he's able to make, we see that when we see him practicing or we see him hustling those guys at the bowling alley, but he cares more about the monetary outcome and prestige rather than the game of ping pong. He doesn't talk about his deep love of ping pong, he has a meltdown over not winning, he is constantly seeking schemes for cash. Ping pong is just the biggest scheme he's pulled off, and like everything else in Marty's life, he has real talent and charm, and then he chokes at the end from receiving any real victory because of the insatiable nature of capitalism and American exceptionalism, making Marty think he's greater than he is and ruining everything around him. It is just a means to an end, like everything else in Marty's life. And not to bring up Fantano again, and I don't like to get into the habit of responding to criticism, but he is such a large and public figure that I'm not afraid to mention him by name, while also at the same time recognizing that I've spent a lot of time, respecting the man, and I think I wouldn't be here on the internet talking about movies in the way that I do without Anthony Fantano. That being said, in his Marty Supreme review that I mentioned earlier, he named Gwyneth Paltrow's Kay having little to no purpose in the film, but it's quite the opposite. She not only narratively is a driving force for Marty to gain some income to travel to Japan, as well as a woman that he can claim that he slept with for prestige, but she also exists to mirror the story that we see Marty go on throughout the film, but she interprets it all so much differently. Kay was an actress of great acclaim and recognition in the 30s who sacrificed her career because of truthfully an unclear reason that lines up with her relationship to her billionaire pen-fortune-having husband, vampire Milton Rockwell, played by Mr. Wonderful. She is a woman known for her fame and beauty when recognized by journalists interviewing Marty, and she is also trapped in a sham whether she is talking about her marriage or her version of the ping pong match, which is this grand play where she is the leading lady on her comeback show, which is all secretly funded by Milton, and on opening night, the entire auditorium is filled with his employees, and not all these people supposedly seeking out Kay's grand return to the stage. What really gets me in her journey with this play is we see Marty appear during the dress rehearsal and recognizing that it's static, non-engaging play filled with stiff performances and empty writing that gives her no room to flourish, and despite these initial grievances, scenes, Kay is shown to have this huge smile of relief when being on that stage and having her grand entrance and being overtaken by this overwhelming and loud applause. Even though she knows it's all artificial, it's all a lie, it's all a facade, she's unable to look past it for a moment. This facade takes over her entire being, and that likely gives her what she believes is her triumphant return, but then she receives her New York Times review and collapses in a pool of tears as she accepts likely being panned. This lie could only last for so long. She recognized that her victory was a hollow victory, and we can question how great of a star actress she was, but in the end, her immediate win becomes a tremendous loss in the same way that Marty's ending is. Josh Safdie talks about the sincerity in his read of the ending and how he viewed Marty Supreme as being a film about who our parents were before they were parents, but I also see it as Marty being in a life with Rachel, a woman he described like his mother with a baby that he didn't want and had trouble accepting. I'm willing to believe that there is some joy at some point in his life, but I also recognize that Marty's endless pursuit helps him receive none of what he ever wanted, puts him in a place farther behind than he ever wanted initially going into the British Open, and like Howard, there are so many Marty Mausers in the world willing to sacrifice everyone around them and end up with nothing just because they chased after being the best without regard of anyone else and destroyed themselves in the process. I think I'll pause here for today. There is certainly a longer video to be made. I love the Safdie's work, especially Uncut Gems and Marty Supreme, and I just think these characters of Marty and Howard, which while so wildly unlikable, capture a sadness that I think only becomes so resonant with time as people become more prone to not necessarily chasing their dreams, but abandoning the lives that they've built with their loved ones for a massive gamble that is no guarantee, while sometimes ruining the lives of their loved ones. Whether this is some middle-aged man gambling their pension in an upcoming Celtics game, or a young man who feels disillusioned with the world around him and wants to carve out a greater place in the world. And there are differences to how these people annoy us. There are differences to how these people have a negative effect on their lives. There's a difference to how much we can tolerate being connected to them at all, whether it's through associateship or family or being a friend. But these are also people that need some level of care or support, and when we think about the Howards or the Martys, these are just the worst examples of some of the people that are in our lives already. But there are many people like this all across the world. There are people who are right on the edge, right on the precipice, who just, if they have a little bit more money to place a bet, if they just have a little bit more time to get closer to greatness, they end up losing everything in the process. And these are all people around us who deserve help. We need to take steps to tearing down this individualistic culture that we have in the United States. Otherwise, everybody will fall victim to this greed. Everybody will take in this poison. Everybody will get lost in their pursuit of being the best, because really, not all of us can be the best. Lots of us have to lose. Lots of us lose everything in being the best. If you enjoyed this video, I appreciate you sticking around. Again, give a like, a comment, a subscribe, hit the bell, share this video with other people who might really enjoy it. Check out my other video essays. I might, put them out every week or two. I am putting out a much less scripted video next week out as an experiment. I'm very interested in how people receive it, aka if anyone sees it. But until then, this is James. I hope you all take care, and I'll see you all next time.